Hi guys, let us continue our study of ecosystem, taking up the next aspect, the role of producers, consumers, and decomposers in ecosystem. Let's see what are the role of these different groups of organisms. Producers are the organisms like plants and algae that convert light energy into chemical bond energy of organic compounds. That means with the help of sunlight, plants are able to synthesize carbohydrates, and this is the food for all other heterotrophs. So therefore, the producers provide food for all other organisms. Now, what are consumers? Consumers are called as phagotrophs or heterotrophic organisms that depend on plants or other animals for their food. So they are called as the consumers. They consume the food by eating the plants or preying upon other animals. That's the common term, consumer. And consumers are further classified into herbivores and carnivores. We know that there are three types of the consumers: herbivore, carnivore, and omnivore. If you take up the herbivore, these are the animals which feed on the plant matter, which either graze upon the grasses or feed on the leaves, fruits, and roots of the plant. So here in this picture, you can see the herbivore or plant-eating some animals are shown, like cow, deer, rabbit, giraffe, and snail, etc. And on the other side, carnivores, which prey upon other animals, especially they feed on the herbivores. So these are the carnivores which eat other animals. They are like starting from the smaller ones, the spiders, which kill and eat away the other smaller insects, then fish, birds, crocodiles, and the big cats, tigers and lions, and other carnivore groups like fox, dogs, etc. They are all considered as carnivores. And those which derive their food from both plant and animal matter, they are called as omnivores. For example, some small birds, they feed both on the seeds and fruits of the trees as well as on the insects. So omnivore. Humans, of course, we get food from both plants and animals. So we are also omnivores. Likewise, bear and other examples are given here. So these represent the omnivore group. Now, herbivores are the animals that depend on plants for their food. Examples if you want to cite here, like grasshoppers which feed on the grasses, then grazing animals such as the cattle, sheep, goat, deer, antelope, rabbit, elephant, horses, donkeys, etc., which feed upon the grasses, herbs, and the plant leaves. And then these herbivores are taken as the primary consumers or first eaters. Now, what are carnivores? Animals that depend on other animals for their food. They are of following types again. What are they? The secondary consumers that feed on primary consumers. For example, in terrestrial ecosystem, frogs, insect-eating birds, snakes, and lizards, fox. These are the secondary consumers. Secondary consumers can be taken as the primary carnivores. Yes, secondary consumers can be taken as primary carnivores. Then Tertiary consumers are those animals that feed on the secondary consumers. For example, owl, peacock, tiger, and lion. They are the predatory organisms, and they they are the secondary carnivores, we can say, and they kill the other animals from the secondary consumer or primary consumer level and feed upon them. Tigers, lion, and hawk cannot be hunted by other animals, so they are called as top carnivores. They are at the top of the food chain. Then tertiary consumers can be taken as secondary carnivores. Now, the decomposers, as we have already learned about them, they are the organisms that derive their energy from dead and decaying matter. They are saprophytic, as they absorb the nutrients from the surroundings. And how they do it, for example, the hyphae or the mycelia of the fungi, these release the enzymes onto the dead and decaying matter, decompose the matter, dissolve the organic matter present in them by their enzymes outside their body, and then the digested nutrients which are released by digestion of this organic matter, that they are absorbing through their body surface, through the surface of the mycelia. So that is why likewise bacteria also do the same thing. So bacteria and fungi, they are called as saprophytic, absorbing the nutrients from the surrounding. And this group of organisms mainly include bacteria and fungi. They are also called as micro-consumers. Decomposers add minerals to the soil so that the plants can take up these nutrients, these minerals, and grow. So they are very important for plant growth. The same thing I have given here in an array diagram. So from the plants, the food is going to the animals, as animals are dependent on the plants. And when the plants and animals they die out and their bodies are decayed through the decomposers, again the nutrients present in their dead bodies are further broken down to release minerals, and these minerals will be again available for the plants to grow. Okay, now let us take up the next concept of ecological succession. Ecological succession, the term indicates that something is happening stepwise, successively. You have seen the forests on the land and along the seashore, huge vegetation is growing and resulting into the thick forest over there, coastal areas, right? Western Ghats, for example. How all these forests have appeared on this earth. How actually the ecological succession takes place, let us see. So here, to understand the ecological succession, let's make use of this diagram, which is there on the screen now. Suppose this is the exposed rock, barren rock, nothing is there, nothing is going on it. So this exposed barren rock will be first inhabited by the lichens and mosses. Lichens have some kind of acids which they release, and they break down the stones into fine gravel like that. Mosses also grow on these gravels and the rocks, and gradually they convert the rocks into soil. And then what happens, when the fine soil is formed and some amount of these lichens and mosses die and their bodies start decomposing. So nitrogenous compounds and organic matter will be again released, minerals will be released into the soil, and soil becomes a little more fertile, and now it can support the reeds and grasses, and then small herbs grow. So like this, gradually the succession starts, ecological succession starts. So perennial weeds grow, grasses grow, and they further make the soil more fertile. And then shrubs start growing. Shrubs are the bushy, woody plants, okay? And they start growing, and after that, the next succession will be of the trees. Trees like the Here, some examples are given of the trees in the succession, like cherry, aspen, and pine. The pine forest is growing, and then the larger trees like beech and maple and broadleaf having the forest will be appearing later on. So once the large trees are formed, they are called as the climax community. So they are perfectly adapted to those conditions, and further they will not be changing. So that is what called as climax community. The organisms which start the succession, they are called as the pioneer community, and the series of the plant organisms, what you see here gradually changing. So these are called as the intermediate communities, or they are also called as seres, S-E-R-E, sere. So it takes long time, sometimes hundreds and hundreds of years may be needed, or even thousands of years may be needed for a natural ecological succession to take place. Okay. Now let us define the term. Ecological succession is the predictable. That means which we can predict, which we can say it may happen like this. Okay. So predictable. The scientists can predict. The ecologists can predict it. So ecological succession is the predictable change of plant and animal communities in an orderly sequence in an area, resulting into the establishment of more stable community. So that's a perfect definition for ecological succession. So what you have to remember is it's a predictable change in the plant and animal community, okay, in an orderly sequence in a given area, ultimately establishing a stable community. So from unstable, simple community, more stable and highly evolved community will be appearing. And remember that as the plants are growing in ecological succession, along with that, the animals also go on inhabiting these places, and side by side, the animal community also show a kind of succession there. The ecological succession that begins on the land is usually called as the xerosere succession, and that on water is called as the Hydrarch succession. Xerosere succession can be further divided into different types. We are going to study about it later on, which are on, say, the sand, on the very dry and very desert-like land, and even on the mountain region. So all those are on mountain slopes. So there are different types of successions, and coastal area. Those successions we'll study later on. First, let us see what are the examples, or how we are going to understand what is happening in the xerosere and Hydrarch succession. First, let us take up xerosere succession. Exposed rock is there, and this rock is inhabited by, or some lichens and mosses grow upon that and break the rock into fine gravel, and gravel into the fine soil. Then when the soil is formed, grasses can grow on that. So grasses start growing, and after the grasses, herbs establish themselves. Herbs are the plants with the tender stems, and then after the growth of the herbs, we see that shrubs appear, which are woody plants, bushy plants with woody stems, we can say, which are larger than the herbs. And after the shrubs, we see that the tall trees appear, as we see here. And once the tall trees appear in that area, the ecological succession comes to an end, because these trees will end up into the forest, and that is what the climax community formed. So pioneer community here is lichens and mosses, and the grasses, herbs, and shrubs are taken as the intermediate community, or seres, and ultimately we have here the climax community coming up. in the form of trees. Now let us go through the definitions of these words. Like pioneer communities, we have said, the group of organisms that first colonized on the exposed barren rock. They are lichens and mosses. They convert the soil rock into gravel by their acidic secretion. Then gradually, gravel changes into fine soil, and dead and decaying mosses add up organic matter to the soil. Now, the grasses begin to establish themselves. Later, herbs grow there. And further, after the herbs, woody shrubs begin to appear there, because maybe the small birds visiting there drop some of the seeds, and from these seeds, the shrubs start growing there. And after the shrub layer, we see that finally large trees grow, and these trees represent the climax community. The climax community does not evolve further because it is in perfect harmony with the environment of that area. So that's why it is called as a climax community. And thus a forest appears there. A climax community has maximum diversity and specialization. That means various different types of the species of trees grow there, and numerous plant species as well as animal species start appearing there and making the forest or thick and green forest. The intermediate communities between pioneer and climax are known as transitional communities. Hydrarch succession, now let's take up. It takes place in the following way. Phytoplanktons first appear, which are the floating microscopic plants on the surface of the water body, and then algae appear there, then submerged vegetation, floating vegetations, and emergent vegetations in succession start growing. And emergent vegetations we see on the bank of the pond or the lake, and gradually by the death and decomposition of these emergent vegetations, the soil on the bank of the pond or the lake becomes more fertile, and grasses start growing there. And after the grasses, herbs, shrubs, and trees start growing, and a forest appears. So that is what the hydrarch succession is. We call it as hydrarch because it is starting with or beginning from the water body, that is from the plankton, phytoplankton, and a shallow water body can be finally converted into a forest. Now, hydrarch succession can be visualized in this diagram, where you see there are first only the phytoplanktons, then submerged plant stage, and then submerged and free-floating plant stage. Then comes the reed and swamp stage, and then more and more plants, herbs and shrubs growing there. So marsh meadow stage, while still the soil is wet and it's a marshy area with little water still accumulating there, and then it is slowly changing into scrub stage, where large number of the shrubs and trees start growing and ultimately resulting into a forest. Now let us take up the ecological succession in terms of different kinds, like it may be beginning in water, beginning in extremely dry conditions, beginning on bare rock, or on the sand. So they are called separate, they are known as different types of ecological succession, and they are named differently. Like, for example, lithosere. Lithosere is the ecological succession that begins on the barren rock, and these rocks might have been formed by the volcanic eruptions. The lava which comes out will undergo cooling, and after several years, it will become a very hard, rocky, barren surface on which the succession starts. And then the psammosere, the ecological succession, which is beginning on the sand, is called as the psammosere along the coastal area. Then hydrosere, where the succession begins in water, and ultimately the xerosere, where the succession of the plants or the ecological succession begins in extremely dry conditions like deserts. Now, this diagram gives you a view of psammoseres, where you see that this is the seashore, sand along the coast, where maybe very tiny sea rockets like plants start their beginning, and then embryo dune we call. Couch grasses start growing, then madam grasses, that is the 4 dune stage, then yellow dune stage, sedge grass grow, larger grasses grow here, and then fixed dune we call, where the heather and other creeping willows and herbs start growing. Shrubs start growing now, a scrub layer forms, and then ultimately the woodland with the large trees appears. So like that, on the coastal area, the forests have appeared. The features of succession. What are the features of ecological succession? Let us quickly go through. It tends to progress from unstable biotic community to stable biotic community. There is some regularity and uniformity in the process of succession, as we have seen. Hence, ecologists can predict the sequence of future communities, like we have seen, starting from the simple one, lichen and the mosses, and we see that how gradually the grasses, herbs, shrubs, and trees appear there. Then, in successive serial stages, there is a tendency towards increase in species diversity, total biomass, niche specialization, and humus content of the soil. That is true. As the succession continues, we see that more and more species of organisms start inhabiting there, and various species of plants and animals start establishing themselves. So species diversity begins there, and then as the number of plants increases, the biomass also increases, and when the animals are making their niches, feeding niche, breeding niche, like that niche is a particular function of the organism in the ecosystem. So they also get specialized, and as the vegetations and the organisms die there, and their dead bodies are decomposed, it's a natural death and decomposition, and that makes the humus and the soil becomes more and more fertile, supporting further growth of vegetation. Then succession tends to progress from simple food chain to complex food webs. That's also true. Then succession of plants and animal communities occurs side by side, as I told you earlier also, that along with the plants, animals also go on inhabiting there. Now, the types of ecological succession. Mainly there are 2 types of ecological successions, primary and secondary. Primary succession occurs on a substratum where no life existed earlier, that is barren rocks. Whereas the secondary ecological succession occurs in an area where previously existing biotic community has been destroyed by fire, drought, landslides, or earthquakes. Now, the primary succession occurs on substratum where no life existed, and we have said that the secondary succession occurs in the area where earlier the life was existing, somehow it was destroyed. Then primary succession takes very long time, hundreds and thousands of years to occur, and to reach the climax community takes a long time. But the secondary ecological succession doesn't take much time. And if you take up the primary succession, no favorable conditions will be there in the beginning. That's why the lichens like organisms only can grow on the barren rock, whereas in the secondary succession, which usually starts from the mosses, so their favorable conditions will be there because favorable conditions will not be destroyed by the natural calamities. The importance of succession, lastly, important functions of the succession or ecological succession, if you take up, helps to achieve controlled growth of one or more species in the forest without the invasion of other species. We can grow some specialized plants in an area, and we can prevent the invasion of other species there. Then pastures can develop that can maintain properly, that can be maintained properly by not allowing the biotic succession to proceed further through grazing. What is pasture? Let us see. Pasture is a land covered by the grass. It's a grassland where the grazing animals go for getting food. And the local farmers take their herds of sheep, cattle for grazing. Now, the succession, ecological succession, also helps us in reforestation and forest management programs. Even the ecological succession also helps in healthy growth of the ecosystem and repair of damaged ecosystem. If the ecosystem is damaged due to infiltration of some other organisms or due to the human activities, so that can be repaired by ecological succession. And that's all. We'll meet again in another video.